What are some of the issues facing tech that he will be hearing, and how do we expect him to rule, whether it's privacy or net neutrality or IP?
Yeah, I think you touched on some of the big issues. When you think of tech, privacy is a big one. The balance between government interests in security and individuals' right to protect their data and their own privacy. It's an issue that a lot of tech companies are grappling with now. Another one impacting tech and kind of the gig economy comes in the form of employment and labor issues, as we're moving from kind of a traditional employer-employee relationship to a lot of companies. You think of like the Ubers, the Lyfts of the world, where companies are contracting with individuals who are, just kind of working on a gig per gig basis. What does that mean for things like arbitration agreements? What does it mean for compensation? A whole slew of issues, and there are obviously discrimination issues that come up as tech and just the larger economy deals with wage discrepancies, with a whole host of different issues that impact different groups, to different extents.
So if Justice Kennedy was the swing vote, whether he was always in every case, he certainly was sometimes, how will Justice Kavanaugh be different? Yeah,
I think the way that a lot of people viewed the Supreme Court, and which falls in line with the way that it rules, is Kennedy was was kind of the center, the ideological center of the court, and he would sometimes side with one side, or the conservative side, or sometimes he would side with the liberal bloc, just depending on the issues and the cases. With Kavanaugh, it's certainly anticipated to be a shift to the right. But that being said, it's not as far right as some of the potential candidates that were out there. So when you look at his history on the D.C. Circuit, a lot of commentators point out that he frequently ruled in line with Merrick Garland, who was stymied last time around. There is some middle ground. His colleagues, in terms of his jurisprudence, are largely complimentary of his willingness to consider other sides. So, for those concerned, there is a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, in that he seems to be thoughtful. I think last time we discussed, even David Kirkpatrick pointed out that he is at least a little bit more academic or pretty considerate in writing his opinions. So there is some hope that his presence on the court may not be as far right as anticipated by some groups.
What about when it comes to women? Obviously we know about the allegations and the last couple of weeks, but Google, for example, the Department of Labor has a big investigation into pay discrimination against female employees. You had Susan Fowler asking the Supreme Court to consider or reconsider its position on arbitration clauses, which basically requires sexual harassment and assault cases to be settled in private. How will Justice Kavanaugh rule on women's issues?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I take two perspectives on that. One is looking through his history on the D.C. Circuit and how he ruled in the past on arbitration-related cases or on labor-related cases, kind of the bull and the bear case, I guess you could call it. So he is traditionally ruled fairly pro-employer, reading limitations.
Pro-employer.
Pro-employer.
Okay.
So limits that are placed on what employers can do, he tends to interpret very narrowly. When it comes to reviewing decisions that come out of arbitration or labor review board decisions, again, he tends to be fairly pro-employer, but not in all cases. And I'll also note that in a lot of these decisions, they're either unanimous or there will be a concurring opinion. So it's not like he's necessarily way outside of the norm, but he is pro-employer. When you look at discrimination cases, this is where it tends to get a little bit dicier, even with the arbitration, is for a lot of these groups and for a lot of women's issues is banding together and being able to operate as a collective voice is beneficial when pushing back against policies that are potentially discriminatory. Stances on the anti-arbitration provisions, things like that, kind of separate out voices and force a situation where you have to litigate those issues on an individual basis in arbitration rather than pull together a class action. So, that's the bear case. On the bull case, Kavanaugh has touted his credentials, his hiring of female clerks, which
just hired four.
His hired four, and if you anticipate that, inside baseball, the clerks are primarily responsible for writing first drafts of the opinions, for pitching ideas. I think there's at least some optimism that will influence decisions down the road. And also, there have been some studies that take a look at conservative justices and how they rule on social issues based on their own kids. And so, as one study put out, is having girls actually tends to push Kavanaugh or similar justices a little bit further to the progressive side when you're looking at health issues or things like that. So it's yet to be seen exactly how he'll rule. Some justices turn left, some turn right once they get on the court. But kind of in the wake of a difficult weekend for a lot of people, I think there is some hope that it's not going to be the doomsday scenario that was painted. But it's yet to be seen how things will play out.
Well, and he pointed out that he has daughters many times. Lots of women, lots of people will be looking at these decisions very closely. Matt Larson, Bloomberg Intelligence, thanks so much.